Welcome. We hope that the microphone check remotely works later. Welcome to the NetConf session at the IETF 120. I'm here with Kent Watson. My name is Per Andersson, and we will facilitate this meeting. It is being recorded. Remember that on the clicker.
So Per is our new working group chair. Thank you for joining, and thank you Mahesh for service for being chair before and now being our AD.
Thank you. So note well, this is the IETF. The participation is are defined in these BCPs. You should go look them up, read them, evaluate them. I will not explain them to you, but a reminder to look at these documents and evaluate their contents. So note really well, we come here as individuals and collaborate together as a community. Be nice to each other. We can have opinions, technical opinions, but be excellent to each other, treat each other with respect. There is, if you feel that you're not being treated with respect, there is an ombuds team that you could contact. You can also approach the chairs if you feel that something is not right, and we will step in. We've not had any such issues during my time in the IETF, and I sincerely hope that we will not have issues going forward either in the future. Meeting tips. So those that are joining remotely, you already have this dialed down. You're here. For the people in the room, please check in with the on-site client so that we get the blue sheets for participation. It's important so we know the size of the NetConf room going forward and subsequent meetings. More resources, on-site tool. There are minutes that you can join. We have a chat, an audio track. We have a 2-hour slot. We have a basically full agenda. We have 10 minutes left in the end that we can use for open mic. If you want to say something, put yourself in the queue. Remove yourself from the queue when you have said your piece. And also, lastly, please help us taking minutes. They're linked in the chat as well. So a couple of new slides. As I said before, the IETF is a volunteer organization. We encourage participation. I've met several new participants at this IETF, and there are several ways to engage in the community to do work. So you can do just engage in the mailing list, answer all or any questions, comment on the microphone at the IETF sessions, state your opinion, review drafts. This is also for long-time participants. Please review drafts. That is the way to progress work. Another thing to do is to implement the work that we're actually defining here. That was very helpful. We value running code. And then to progress work outside of the working group, there is the possibility to be a document shepherd. And lastly, currently we don't have a secretary. I was secretary before being appointed as a co-chair. So that is vacant. For authors and presenters, you might have seen this in other working groups as well. We will now request authors of all working group documents to provide a status update at the IETF, at every IETF meeting. Status includes at a minimum recent changes, outstanding issues, and a plan to complete the document, making it leave the working group. And updates are done either as a presentation here at the IETF or a mail to the working group list, no later than the ID cutoff. So continued, as I said, we're a community. The NetConf community is a sub-community in the IETF. Active authors are encouraged to participate in the review of other working group documents, and not only your own work or the work that you're interested in. So that increases working group participation and activity. It reciprocate effort shown by others, and also illustrates a broader understanding, interest, and thought leadership about the work that we're doing here. And be aware that your co-chairs, or we co-chairs, we are human beings, and we may forget things, miss deadlines, things fall between the cracks. So if you observe this, please reach out to us so we can mitigate it. So these are the current documents that are now post the working group initiative. So we have a few in the RFC editor queue, the Zero Touch, the first 6 client server drafts, and NetConf over TLS 1.3. And then we have a few that are in ISG evaluation or AD evaluation, HTTPS Notif, HTTP client server, NetConf and RESTConf client server. So we ask the current AD, Mahesh, to please say something about the drafts in AD follow-up and AD evaluation.
Mahesh, so starting from the bottom, the last 2 drafts were actually on Rob's queue when he was area director, and he had actually already provided his review on those 2 drafts, and subsequently there was an exchange between him and Kent. I did follow up. Rob actually has agreed to finish up those review comments. And since he has the most context on those comments that he provided, I thought it would be better. I'm more than happy to step in if need be, but as of now, I think Rob said he's more than happy to look at them. The other 2 drafts, I noticed that, Kent, you did post an update to the HTTP client server draft a couple of weeks before this meeting. And at this point, I guess, are we waiting for kind of a okay from Mark Nottingham and others that we had a meeting about? Because I think that's what is kind of gating our whatever the example update for HTTP Notif draft, right? So question, sorry, for you are at this point, as far as HTTP client server is concerned, my understanding is that we are waiting for a kind of okay from that group of people that had put a discuss on the document, right?
Kent is an author. Yes, exactly that. The draft was updated, and we're just waiting to see if it was okay or satisfactory.
Okay. So the status is, I think once they kind of give their tacit approval on the draft, I will go ahead and update the HTTP, or between Kent and I, one of us will update the HTTPS Notif draft to get it to publication status. Thanks.
Rob, you want to say something?
I need to confirm that I'll do those, finish off those reviews with you. I'm not sure I'll get to this week, but otherwise I'll try and get to next week. But
okay, great, thank you.
Carrying on. These are the drafts that we are currently working on in the working group. Everything except the last one, adaptive subscription to Yang notification, will be discussed in this meeting. The adaptive subscription to Yang notification has had an update on the mailing list. So go read that. This is the agenda. We will start off with the list pagination presentation. Then we will have transaction ID and trace context. External trace ID for configuration, NetConf private candidates, support of versioning in Yang notification subscriptions, UDP-based transport for configured subscriptions, Yang groupings for UDP clients and UDP servers, subscription to distributed notifications, and now entering non-chartered items, Yang model for NetConf event notifications, support of hostname and sequencing in Yang notifications, support of network orchestration, timestamping in Yang notifications, using NetConf over Quick connection, Yang groupings for quick clients and quick servers, and augmented by addition into the IETF Yang library. That concludes the chair slides.
On to our first presentation.
Yes. Shin, please take the room, the floor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Qing Wu, and on behalf of also this draft, I want to present this pagination for young driving protocol. For this work, actually can be break down into three drafts. The first draft focuses on standard mechanism to control filtering, retrieval of entry list and if list. Just to recap what this draft about. And the other two drafts is about a NETCONF extension and a RESTCONF extension to support list pagination. And the current status actually, this chapter I think already passed through the working group last call, and but we do receive the young doctor review from NADA. So just before this meeting, we also get together to discuss the issue raised during the young doctor review and reach agreement for propose the changes. So you can see the latest version actually we post all version 04. Actually, we add a bunch of example and also make some text change and also fix some back in the draft actually. And in addition, actually, we make an update for implementation status. I will introduce these later slides. And but still, we have three open issue remain, and for example, define limit equals 0, and local for order by the list, and we also have XML list example validation. So these three issues we would like to solicit feedback from this meeting. So the current status, you will see actually we have a bunch of implementation. Actually, we have one more complete implementation from OAuth Hacksand. Actually, is one of our this pagination author. And this implementation is based on, Clixon open source project, supported both NETCONF and RESTConf protocol. And it is supported, almost all the feature except, cursor, local, and sublist limit. And the other, implementation actually, not a complete implementation, but, try to cover, most of the functionality or feature we, define in the draft. Actually, some of implementation only support NETCONF. Some of draft implementation only support RESTConf. And so these are current status of implementation. And for young doctor review, actually, I think two issues raised by NADA. The first is about the XPath default context issue. And based on author discussion, actually, we think we should follow the Young 1.1 section 641. That is actually, for NETCONF case, we will use the prefix to identify the XPath default context. For RESTConf, we use the module name. And I think this already be, be repeatedly discussed on the list. Actually, it's kind of general agreement. We also actually believe that it's the right way to go and to address this, issue. And the second one is, is about the current mechanism we define whether, it's, only designed for SQL database or tie with, SQL database. Based on author discussion, we think, the mechanism we define is more generic mechanism. So we're more focused on standardized the common functionality. So we can cover not not only SQL but also some other database system. So in the introduction, we shortly briefly discussed the variety of the database system. We also re-emphasize in the draft, we are leveraging all the underlying database system capability to address a lot of comments. So I think we also actually already actually just before this meeting and per take action, send a response on behalf of the author to check NADA whether they are happy. He is happy about the change. I think we also believe actually the comments raised in the young doctor review has been resolved. So, so we have three open issues. The first is, limit equals value 0. This feature we already, implemented, incorporated in the latest version. Actually, the basic use case is, to support the debug and to, validate the query. And in some example, for example, in the response, we can make sure that, when we set the limit as a 0 in the request, we can return the empty result set. We think it's a good feature, but we want to get a sense of the room, whether people think it is a useful feature and it is necessary, since your limit only evaluate, at the last order. And so actually, we also make some other change. Actually, I probably should, summarize early. Actually, for example, we fix some incorrect example and they're in the appendix, and also we add a missing error identity example also in the appendix, and we update, sort by string pattern, especially for the decision schema node ID. Actually, make sure that it is correct. And so the second open issue is about local for order by the list. Actually, for list, we know actually it can be ordered by user, ordered by system. So the question is, must this list report local used without sort by? And based on also discussion, we actually, we think, need to evaluate these two cases. For the case of ordered by the user, we probably is not, desirable to report local without a sort by, since user, just randomly, define the order. But for the case of the order by system, we think it's the way to go, since system lexically store the item according to system locals. And if you have any, thought or about this, please feel free to comment on this. And the last issue is about young data XML list validation. Actually, as we know, NETCONF already support XML encoding. So to make sure, provide consistent access of the list resource, we think, it's also necessary and to add XML encoding for the RESTCON protocol. And so in current draft, actually in the appendix, we have several examples. And we think if we add this feature, this support, we need to, validate the example. But still there's some missing pieces. We think to support this, to validate this example, we need to, introduce some model extension, maybe define the model, for example, to make sure we can return in the response, using the top level elements like XML list to include all the XML data that it defines in some other model. And yeah, next step, I think we want to get more eyes on this draft, and we want to make draft ready for publication. So the author for the next the proposed step for the author is we will validate this example and to try to fix the missing pieces and for the third open issue, and also we'll correct the ambiguity text. For the open question we raised here, actually we are happy to hear more input feedback, and we will take on to to narrow down these three open issues. So that's all. And any comments, suggestions, Mahesh?
Just quickly, as a chair, the draft hasn't gone into working group last call just yet. We're hoping to go to working group last call in about 3 months, or as soon as we can.
Mahesh, so I was happy to see that there's an implementation of the drafts. This came up as a comment actually from Thomas, if I want. He just suggested that we should try to get more implementations of our drafts. So thank you for that. On the question of locale, maybe I didn't understand the problem statement. Isn't ordered by user supposed to be, meaning in the order that the user thinks is the correct order? And I can understand why locale might be used for ordered by system, because it has to be what the locale lexically thinks is the right order. But I'm not sure if I understand why ordered by user is an issue and how its relationship to locale.
Short response is that ordered by, you have got it exactly correct. So ordered by user, it doesn't make sense at all. But for ordered by system, you could present, I mean, the system order could be sorted lexically by the locale used. Okay. So the server can or may present that if that is the case. That is the thinking.
All right. And Per saying that as a co-author.
Sorry, yeah. Learning on the job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Rashad, you drop your question. Okay, so let's thank you very much, Shin, and let's carry on to the next presentation. Jan, transaction ID.
All right. So we are about to present 3 documents in 10 minutes, so this will be with some tempo. It seems I don't have control, so could you take the next slide, please?
Give me a second to give you slide control.
Thank you.
Have it now.
So currently we have draft IETF NETCONF transaction ID 06. Actually, there was on Monday I submitted a new version, but function-wise, there's no big change since 03. There has been several reviews, and that's actually why I did a version 6 recently, because there was a lot of several reviews with stylistic and language spelling and so on updates. But functionally, the document has been the same since 03. And the only thing that happened in between is basically a small bug with the namespace reference that was wrong, and some other page material. So it's related to a number of different drafts, as you have seen through the years. We have the trace drafts, the family of trace drafts. And I think that now the separation of concerns between transaction ID and the trace drafts are quite clear and in a useful way. And we have the privcand. There was some overlap there too. And I believe that now we have cleared up important points with the privcand as well. We know how they should work together. The transaction ID style can now be used with privcands, and it is possible to abort a privcand transaction when there are conflicts. So those 2 things have been fixed in from the privcand side. And there is now, of course, a new draft coming up, which talks about Yang provenance, that is defining a fairly similar mechanism for keeping cryptographic checksums over Yang data trees that maybe we should align with in some way. So next steps for this piece of work, we have done the alignment with the trace drafts, with the privcand drafts, and we have a sort of partial implementation of this, and it seems to work fine. So we're sort of asking, there hasn't been any sort of material changes into this draft for a while, and I think all the administration pieces of it that I can think of are done also. So I wonder if it's maybe time for a last call.
So Kent, as a chair, I think you're asking for a working group last call, and if there's no objections, we'll be starting that immediately after this meeting.
Thank you. And with that, I'll hand over control to Rocky, because we're going over to the trace drafts.
Rogue, you should have slide control.
Okay.
You need to move to the next deck.
All right. So thank you very much. Hope you hear me well. Okay. I'm presenting on behalf of the authors. All right. Thank you. Of the authors of the trace context extension. And there's two different documents because one is for NETCONF and the other one is for RESCONF. So very quick update on the two drafts. Basically, what we are doing is taking what the W3C has defined as a trace context and implemented in the two protocols. The only thing we've been changing the last releases was basically the adopting the requirement from the IESG to actually minimize the number of should and review that in which should actually be must. So we did a number of these changes. But besides that and adding the security consideration, pretty much we believe the draft is, both of them are in very good shape, pretty much done from our side as an author. And we actually do have a full implementation in the case of NETCONF from client and server, and also in the case of RESTCONF, the server side. This is going to be part of, we're really looking forward for any interoperability. We did took some open source tools, particularly in Python, and did test of these implementations. So regarding the document, we think we are in a mature stage with nothing in our to-do list right now. So just to give you a quick brief of the interoperability that we've been doing, and just to remind everybody on what exactly we're trying to achieve here. What we're trying to do is to tap your RESTCONF and NETCONF environment into the application performance management suite. So the idea that there are, what we are able to do was to show that the same context that you implement in your Python request and Flask libraries can be used to send to a RESTCONF server, and then implementing this to backends that talk OpenTelemetry. So this was very successful, and we're really looking forward anybody who wants to also participate in this sort of test, either with NETCONF or RESTCONF. We also show that that the context that is actually sent back to the backend can actually review them and implement it. You saw that we tested with around 10 different backends. Some of them are open source, some of them are commercial. And basically, the key of the puzzle here is the next slide, where you're going to see that for when you have the Python RESTCONF client sending to the actual RESTCONF server, giving trace context, and then the backend is able to put all the traces in the right order. So now we are able to analyze and create the use cases that we detailed in the draft. So all in all, just to summarize, both drafts are in a very mature stage. We think we're pretty much, we don't have anything else in our to-do list. What we have as a next step, the first one is I want to ask the chairs, maybe not directly now, but there is an option to submit and register these protocols in the W3C registry, and this can be done pretty fast. I wanted to check with the chairs which process you want to do. It's very simple. Edit on a Git repository. So getting that will give visibility to the overall developing community that this document exists. If there's any implementation test needed, that would be great. If anybody wants to do an implementation test with us or modify any open source NETCONF, RESTCONF client server, we're happy with that. And then there's a monitoring work we're doing to monitor some other development in W3C lateral to this, which is the baggage headers, which is something that is not yet fully implemented in W3C, but we are monitoring. So that's about it for our summary. Yeah.
So, Per, as a co-chair, do you want the chairs to register this, or should it be a section in the draft, or how would such a registration with W3C actually go down?
Yeah, so this copy W3C, in their case, they just need somebody to do a push request in their Git, and then they go through a review process. And I'm happy to do it, or you tell me. The process is pretty simple. I can in their side, correct?
So I'm asking broadly also as a co-chair and IETF participant, how is the process for going about this? Because I don't know.
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. I can do it. That's why before doing it, I wanted to ask the chair how we deal with these registries which are outside of the IANA, correct?
Mahesh, I don't know it either, but I think if you are familiar with the process and if you feel that this would be beneficial to the community, can we, maybe the chairs, we should ask whether he can do it.
I don't believe it's necessary from an IETF perspective to register with W3C. We've never done it before, but if it's the right thing to do for that community, then we should. But who would do it? Is it I mean, would it be individual contributor like the authors to do, or
I would think that
more formal?
Can we really stop them or anyone?
I mean, I would think that as an individual, you should be able to create a registry entry, right? Why? Does IETF have to get involved necessarily?
So if I just sort of squint hard, and the feeling from the room is that it's up to you.
Okay. Just one comment. I think it's beneficial for the IETF community also because it involves giving awareness of this work, correct? In that regard, for developers who may get to the work through the W3C, correct?
Rob Wilton, so I would check. I mean, Chris Hops has put the right message into the chat, but I think we might have a liaison to W3C. I can't remember who it is, but we could check with the IAB and reach out to them, and they'd actually sort of guide it through the process and tell us. We'd talk to the right people on this side to say whether this is a good thing or not. I'm thinking Mark Nottingham or maybe Martin might be the people involved, but I can't sure. I think that also might be what WG, so I don't know.
Mahesh here again. I think Chris is in the room, in the NetConf room, if I see the attendee list. So maybe if he can come to the mic. But regardless, I mean, does it have to be a liaison statement, or I'm wondering this is, anyway, we probably should ask Chris or Mark for guidance on whether which should be IETF initiated liaison statement.
Chris says he's unable to come to the microphone, but this makes me wonder, are there other drafts that we should have been registering with at W3C as well? So let's, we're out of time at the moment, but this is very interesting. Thank you, Roke.
Sure.
On this one, I think, is there a desire to go to working group last call?
Yeah, it's a question for the authors. Do you request a working group last call? Is that in your next step?
Yeah. So from an author perspective, we don't have anything else in the queue to add. So we do believe the documents are ready, and we have some implementations already done.
Okay, so we will start that as well after, if there is no objection after this meeting. So, Sean, external transaction ID for configuration tracing.
Thank you. Hello. So yes, the quick update on the configuration tracing. So just to remind the context, the idea is to be able to trace the configuration changes from the orchestrator up to the NE. And basically, it's very aligned with the work of Jan and Roque, is the same thing. So I will just go into the updates. So basically, the main update was to propose here to add, as we have for the trace parent, to have another extension into the RPC to pass another annotation into the RPC node to pass the client ID. Yeah, so first question would be, is that the right thing to do? Because otherwise, it's just a proposition, but I think it's the easiest way to obtain it. And I actually, for the other one, the second part of this slide, it's more experimental, I think. I tried to actually have the trace parent and yes, that's basically the yes, this W3C trace parent implemented in YongLib and sysrepo and netopere. And I had to define this annotation to get it accepted. So the question is that the correct way to do things, to add an annotation? To me, it seems like it's not at the right level, but this is what YongLink likes. And maybe Jan, if you want to take this one right now.
Sure. As far as I've been looking at the annotation draft, it doesn't speak about how you would annotate administrative tags like RPC. It only talks about how you apply these to content nodes. So that's why in transaction ID, for example, we didn't use this, because it's not, we have many attributes sitting on things that are not content nodes. So that's why I didn't use it. So I would think that this, what we see on the screen right now, is actually beyond what you can do with client, with this annotation mechanism properly. At least you are in the undefined area right now.
Okay.
But maybe some tools require that. I don't know.
Kent, as a contributor, you have an XML example or actually a NetConf example. Is it a RESTconf example as well?
No, not no RESTconf for that, but I could add one.
Will you add a RESTconf example?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
And so the next step, actually, so I think on this one, basically Jan already answered this question because he already did the work about how to align the drafts. So I have to admit I didn't read the last update from this draft. So I will just check that it's correct, but it seems that this part is done at least. So that's all for me. Yeah, Andy.
Andy Bierman, can you go back to the slide with the RPC on it?
Yep.
Well, so two comments. One, you're aware that the RPC element is not modeled in Yang and never will be. So that's, it doesn't need the annotation because that only applies to things modeled in Yang. And RFC 6241 mandates that all of the attributes in the RPC are returned unchanged in the RPC reply. So just be aware that, so these aren't special or anything, in any conformant implementation just returns everything that was in the RPC. And so you can put whatever you want in there, and you always could. So
okay,
you'll get it back in the RPC reply. You know, so that's message ID is obviously one that that's like, you know, uses that mechanism.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next presentation.
NetConf private candidates, James.
Unlock the queue.
All right. So a quick reminder for anyone who hasn't read it. The idea of the NetConf private candidates draft is to allow you to have independent candidate configurations in NetConf and RESTconf on a per session basis. So some updates from the last meeting. Draft 3 was published that had some fairly significant changes based on working group feedback from the last meetings, particularly around conflict detection and resolution and making that a little clearer and identifying kind of how that works. And we gave a structured set of minimum requirements for what is a conflict and then allowed it to be extensible as well. And then draft 4 was published reasonably before the meeting and just had some minor, largely kind of grammatical and what have you errors fixed. There are, however, a few outstanding issues. One was to do with Yang models. We'll talk about that. One was about selecting whether a private candidate is used at all or not. We'll talk about that. And then about whether or not we needed to include the source data store in a commit. And those two are kind of linked together. And then there was a question from Jan, thank you Jan, about how just clarifying the workflow for how a conflict is marked and then resolved. So we'll show that as well. So these are changes, as I said, mainly around what constitutes a conflict. We added the Yang models. We'll talk about that in a moment. We clarified the behavior with commit confirmed because that was not very well specified. We provided a solution for delete config, which also wasn't in the previous version. We updated the diagram for NMDA just to give a more complete picture. It's always useful to have the pictorial version as well. And we added some sections that described following the feedback from Kent about what the draft was updating in other RFCs. This one I'm not going to cover in too much detail. There were two models for providing this information. One was to update the base models in the various model sections, which makes private candidates blend very well with the rest of the NETCONF infrastructure. But there are some downsides to that. It's updating both technically and from a procedural point of view. So it's updating many modules. And actually, you can't in Yang 1.1, which is some of the base modules are in, you can't do the OR statement for if feature. So actually, that causes a technical problem because you can't do if feature candidate and if feature private candidate, or rather, or if feature private candidate. You can only do the and. The other approach is augments, and I mean that provides visually a different approach for private candidates from the rest of the base operations. But following the advice from the working group on the list, this feels to be the more favored approach. So it's the approach that we kind of plan on taking forward. It's just some examples of, let's go for the next two because they're available for your use later. But some examples of the errors that you get with the OR statement and some of the procedural and technical issues if we chose the updating the base models approach. So say we're going to move forward with the augmentation approach, and that will be in the next revision. The next question was, how do we select if private candidates are used at all? And this kind of boils down to, should NMDA clients be supported? There's a feeling amongst the authors, and there has been no objection so far in terms of the list. And I'll talk about the side meeting we had earlier this week as well in a moment. So there's a feeling that non-NMDA clients should be supported. Our experience is that most of the clients out there in the industry today are non-NMDA clients. Clearly not all, but the majority that are in use today seem to be in that bracket. So the draft already provides a very straightforward mechanism to make this work with all of those with very little changes and no changes to clients, which is kind of the most important piece here. However, it does ask the question, should an individual client be able to select on a per session basis whether or not they are using private candidates or not? And this comes down to the NMDA candidate approach. There are a few options. I can't remember what I've got here. No, there are a few options around this. One is that you can, on a per session basis, have the private candidate choose which target data store it's going to target in the NMDA way. The other option is that you could essentially say, we'll use the same approach for non-NMDA as NMDA and use the client capability approach. And there are pros and cons for both. And that's something that we did discuss at the side meeting, which I'll cover in a second. Andy, do you want to do your question now?
Yeah, so because the initial module is 1.0, you're not allowed to augment it in 1.1, and you're not allowed to publish a 1.0 module. So your second solution doesn't work either. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So when you say we're not allowed to augment the 1.0,
Yang 1.1 is not allowed to augment, is not allowed to, 1.0 has to be
augmented by 1.0.
Yeah, well, I need to double check that. I'm sure, I know there's text about mixing 1.0 and 1.1. It could be that it just has to be automatically converted to 1.1. Maybe I'll double check it, but it's, there's definitely issues with mixing 1.1 and 1.0.
Yeah, that would be great. If you could point us at the text, that would be fantastic. We did do some test implementations with the various linters, and they do seem to work. But I mean, that might just be that the linters are not conforming to the standards. That's quite possible. But yeah, that would be really useful. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, let's move on to this one. So the reason that we kind of asking this question is because there was some feedback earlier on in the kind of working group that locking individual data stores individually was important. And if you follow that, then should you be able to target individual data stores with a single client? So should an NMDA client be able to target candidate and private candidate as their theoretically independent data stores in a single session? And if the answer to that the working group feels is yes, then it comes down back to this question, which is, okay, well then when you do commit, what are you committing? And should we therefore add the data store extension to commit as well? So you could say push stuff to candidate, push stuff to private candidate, I'm going to commit the private candidate one or the candidate one. So that's an approach there. If the answer is that we feel we don't want to be able to target things on a per transaction basis, or we don't need to, or that it's explicitly bad not to, then you could say everything in one session is a private candidate or a candidate. And then it opens the question of, do we need the private candidate data store, or do we follow the client capability where candidate means private candidate? Ken, you have a question.
Yes, Kent, as a contributor of the two choices, I much prefer the second. I don't understand the reason why we would ever want to have both private candidate and shared candidate in the same session.
Sure. But when you say you prefer the second, so the second has a couple of nuances to it as well. One being that if you target private candidate, you're targeting a private candidate, fine. If you then target candidate, what should happen? And what makes that decision? Is it a first right, or is it some kind, or is it the client capability? And we say we always use that, including for NMDA. So there are a couple of nuanced kind of questions there.
I guess you're asking me as a contributor again.
Yes.
I like the idea of if we agree that you cannot target separately the candidate and shared candidate same session, then private candidate could just be called candidate. And that idea.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me, and it seems cleaner, more backwards compatible with existing systems.
Yeah, I would agree in some ways. In other ways, it's also isn't very NMDA like, where we have the list of data stores and we're adding more data stores as we go, and then you have one data store that means one thing except when it doesn't. So that's the only concern there, is it feels a little less in line with some of the other NMDA extensions that are coming through. Rob.
Just a quick comment. You could rephrase this and think, actually, you always have one candidate data store, as in it's just a candidate data store, and what you're changing is the property as to whether that's shared or private.
Yes.
So I know that then, and then you don't have less justification for saying it has to have a different name, because it's actually still the same data store. It's just different property.
Yes. Thank you. All right. we held a side meeting on Tuesday. The items were discussed, and the outcome from that was essentially that there's a preference for the augmentation approach, which I think matched the discussions we had on the working group list as well. There was a discussion then of this would then be potentially rolled into the the more base models approach in NetConf Next solution, which would also make sense. There was a preference to providing support for existing non-NDA clients. I think we kind of communicated that, and I see some people nodding around the room. And we did have this discussion on the NMDA clients thing. And I think the short answer was that there was no clear preference. I would say it was still fairly hung in terms of, well, they all work and they all provide the solution, and yeah, no particular preference. So the plan was for the authors to take feedback from this meeting, bring it to the list again, and then ultimately pick a proposed solution in the next version of the draft. And then very quickly, I know we're out of time, this was the response to, which you, I don't know, maybe a bit of an eye chart. This is how does an element get marked as a conflict? I'll very quickly talk through it, and you're probably better reviewing it on your own laptops. You're going to be able to zoom in. But you have a configuration, 2 private candidates open their copies of the candidates. Private candidate 2, which is the one in the kind of orangey type color, makes a change to a leaf, calls it Apple, and then commits that in. Private candidate 1 that originally took its copy before that change happened, changes it to banana. Does its commit, the draft says commit runs an update, and the default for update is that it will fail if there's a conflict, so it fails, gives you the error. And the running configuration stays as Apple. Just to demonstrate, you could also run an update with a default, and it will fail in exactly the same way. But the banana kind of leaf now is marked as in conflict. The draft doesn't define kind of on purpose how you should mark this. We felt that this is probably an implementation detail that should be left to the implementers. You can then run an update with a resolution mode of ignore, which will say, what I have in my candidate is what I want to keep, and ignore anything that comes in. And at that point, we mark that node as resolved. And then next time you do your commit, it will then pass. So that's just a kind of a quick example of how the workflow should work. And then our next steps, we wanted to add an additional RPC error tag for conflict. There weren't any other kind of error tags that were ideal. Finalize the solution for the NMDA client piece. Clarify whether a conflicted node being edited rather than updated resolves a conflict or not. And then move to last call is the request. So not right now, but immediately after the next.
All right, great. Thank you, James. Looking forward to moving to last call before the next meeting. And but we're running 3 minutes behind, so I'm gonna push you off stage. All right, Alex?
All right, so Thomas.
Oh, sorry, Thomas.
Good. Hello, everybody. Short up.
Just a quick follow-up for I got it backwards. It's 1.0 that is not allowed to import 1.1. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Are we on 7 or 6? Which one are we on? Oh, yeah, okay, my bad.
Okay, perfect. So hello, everybody. So this is a short update on support of versioning in Young notification subscription. A brief reminder what the document is about. So it's about adding in the subscription start notification message, the revision module name and the revision label so that we can identify which Yang modules are behind. And also with the capability during the subscription that we can actually define the Yang module revision, because that could potentially change due to a software upgrade on the Yang push publisher. We only have one minor change to the last revision number. So during an implementation, we noticed that in the case statement, identifiers needs to be unique. This has been addressed and fixed. Thanks to Jeremy from SyncSwind noticing that. We have a hackathon activity at IETF 120, where we continued the validation among different implementations. So now currently for the Yang notification versioning, we have 2 implementations. And as a note, this is a part of 6 documents. They are related to the NMOP document about the message broker integration. If that is of interest, please join on Friday between 1 and 3. That's all. Looking forward for your feedback.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
And now, Alex. And we are running about 6 minutes behind our schedule, which is okay because we had 10 minutes remaining, but we would like to have open mic.
So it should be a short presentation, this one. So,
Okay.
so Alex from Instant Leon on behalf of the authors presenting an update on the UDP notif draft. We haven't got we haven't got any feedback from since the last iterations. The only updates has been regarding the Yang module from the working group. We understood that there was some interest on having the generic UDP client server groupings in an external draft. So we have exported that in a dedicated draft, and therefore on the UDP notif we are using that grouping. The impact is that now, rather than configuring a receiver to an IP address no zone, we are able to configure inet host, so host names, and we are also able to configure local addresses. Given that on the first version of the UDP client server draft, there was a default statement on the port, we had to ask Ayana for a default port to put on the and be refined on the UDP notif, but we got feedback from Matt that it was a very weak argument for UDP notif to us just because of the Yang needs to refine. He was proposing to remove the default statement from the UDP client server draft and put the mandatory again on the UDP notif. So we did that, and just and there are no pending items on this draft. We feel that it's ready almost for last call. Just yeah. So just a quick update. It's this Yang module where we are configuring the port, the address, and the local addresses.
So Mahesh, you're in the queue.
Mahesh, sorry, I might be confused about. So, do we need a default port, and should be requesting IANA and the rollback to the mandatory port? Could you possibly clarify where are we currently with the status of requesting for a default port?
So the default port for UDP notif, it was added already some iterations ago. We got feedback from the working group that it was not necessary, since when configuring UDP notif, you already need to configure the IP, and therefore it's already the operator who can configure the port. So our position is that it's not needed. But given that the UDP client server, there was a default statement, and we needed to refine that default statement on the UDP notif, I had to ask the IANA for a default port. So our position is that it's not needed, but given that now we depend on the UDP client server draft, and in that draft there is a default statement, I had to ask.
I think that's the wrong answer. So I think they're going to turn around and say no. It's like if you ask them for a port that's limited resource, and it's like, we don't really need this, but we're asking just to tick a box, then that's going to then say no, I'd have thought. So is there any use here for having a port assigned? Because if there's not, then I think we should find a way that we don't need that.
Kent, as a contributor, when I published the NetConf call home, RESTConf call home, we did get ports assigned for it. Because of course the remote server, like what is the port you're connecting to? So I think in this case, we're talking about the remote port that we're connecting to.
So, so it's the remote port for the receiver. You are configuring where to send the notifications to.
And we didn't have to do this for the HTTP node of draft because of course it was 443.
Because I mean, I guess if it's always configured and you're configuring where it's going to, then you sort of, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to actually use a default port. I think it's worth speaking to, not IANA first, I'll speak to whoever the experts, designated experts are for this, to find out from them whether we should have a port allocated or not. And they'll give you an answer and then take it from that direction, is what I suggest.
Channeling Chris Hops on the chat, he says you aren't doing first contact to a server, so you don't need a reserved default port.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, we try to avoid the ask for the default port. So yeah, and then next presentation is about the young generic groupings for UTP clients and UTP servers. So here, these groupings was on the first iteration extracted from the UDP notif, and feedback from the working group is that it is generic, and therefore we are going generic. So we are able to configure a host name on the client and the server. And we are able also to configure local address on the client, and on the server was based on the discussion on the TCP grouping and UDP grouping, where a server can support dual stacks. So a server can configure IPv6 and IPv4 on the same server. So there is a list of local binds. Here it's a bit the same discussion with the UDP notif. We received feedback from MET that the default port 0 was not flexible enough on this grouping and therefore should be removed. So we removed it in the -04 iteration, but I understand that therefore it mismatched a bit with the TCP client server draft. So yeah, asking for feedback. What should we do? We should add again the default port or remove it and give flexibility to developers.
So is this default port for the local or remote port?
I think it's for both, but I'm not sure now.
And what was the reason to change it from being the same as TCP client server draft?
To consistency. So at the first iteration, I wanted, given that there was already an existing TCP client server grouping, having a consistent, let's say, groupings, right? Okay, so that was the only reason.
No, consistency is good. But I guess my question is, what was the reason to change it to be different?
It was feedback from MET. So to give flexibility, because the thing is that when we add a default statement on a grouping, the ones using that grouping cannot refine and remove that default statement.
They can refine it.
They can refine the port, but they cannot remove it and add a mandatory statement, for example. That was my issue on the UDP notif. So UDP notif, we had a mandatory port to be defined, and I tried to, okay, I want to remove this default statement from the grouping, but I could not. So, and I checked with Yang, and that's actually not supported from a Yang perspective.
It's true you cannot remove it, but I'm not sure if that's important. Let's take this one to the list.
Okay. So yeah, apart from that, there are no other, all comments are addressed. So I think it's ready for last call.
Pending that discussion.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, if there is no comment, I will follow up. And then also presenting an update on the distributed notif draft on behalf of the authors. There have been no change since the last iterations. The only ones have been very minor, adding the message publisher ID. So that's the process where the publisher sends the message to a receiver, and that's it. And this process ID is added to the different state change notifications, push update and push change update notifications now. And given that we are pushing these process IDs on this draft, this has led to the removal of this publisher ID on the sequencing draft. And there is no pending items on the distributed notif.
Rob is in the queue.
Hi. So as long as I'm getting the right draft, so I had a discussion with Thomas earlier this week at the hackathon about a concern that I have, that where you split up a subscription into child subscriptions, you may want to know what XPath those child subscriptions are for, and to advertise that both at the sort of parent subscription and the child subscriptions. And my particular concern is about when you're sort of pushing on resynchronization data, and you split up this parent subscription, is you need to make sure you have all the data from all the different child subscriptions. So it was about how you piece that data together and know you've got everything. So I think that would be a useful discussion to have. Could do a last call, but I think that would be, does that sound correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Thomas.
Yeah, so that's all. So basically, yeah, the only diff it's adding this publisher ID on the push update and push change update notification.
Okay. So I see that you're hoping to move to working group last call. I'm just a little bit surprised to do that, or like, it seems like this draft got parked for a while. We weren't working on it. We weren't discussing it. It was updated. The 09 was published, what was it, 3 months ago? But no discussion on list. It may be ready for working group last call, but because it was kind of in a background status for a little while, I think I'd encourage pushing the other drafts that you have in progress first, try to get them through working group last call, and then we'll bring this one to working group last call. So
yeah, so every time we have been pushing this draft to last call when the UDP notif was ready for last call. So that's what, in a way, we were waiting for all the drafts to be last call at the same time.
Okay.
And a little more history, sorry, Mahesh, a little more history on the distributed notif was that I think we parked it because we were waiting for HTTPS notif draft to get through before they requested for publication.
Yeah, and Thomas, and just to top up what just Alex said before, we also have now 3 vendor implementations. That was also another reason why we said, like, let's make sure that we have enough implementation, so we are sure about that.
Okay, excellent. Okay,
yeah.
Great. And you giving back some time to the working group?
Happy?
Thank you.
I think I am also the next one.
Okay.
Yeah. I just need the next slides. So yeah, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, I'm Alex again. So on behalf of the authors, presenting an update on the Yang model for NETCONF event notifications. So to give you back a bit of context, what we are trying with This draft is to get Yang tooling to validate Yang push notification. The issue is that Yang push in 8641, they rely on 5277 for the notification header. When this message is encoded in XML, we have the model in XML and Yang push in Yang, so we are able in a way to validate the message. But when this message is encoded in other encodings such as JSON or CBOR, there is no Yang model to validate that message, and that's what we are trying to tackle in this draft. So just to give you a status, there was a working group adoption call. It showed plenty of support and clear interest from the working group to fix with this draft in a way how to validate Yang push messages. But there was a pushback from MET on why this draft was only defined in the notification and not the whole model from 5277. The positions from the authors is that all the RPCs are redefined in Yang push, and there is only one piece missing, which is the notification, and that's why we are in a way trying to solve this gap. And then there are a few Yang push related topics that were triggered and a bit sidetracked the thread.
Andy is in the queue.
Andy Bierman, yeah. The structure only validates event time. That's all you're allowed to put in it. So
yes,
there is no industry problem at all having to parse a notification and then the event time leaf. But if you want I mean, so the structure would only be good for the first element, not the next one, which is an abstract element in XML, which is absolutely not supported in Yang, not even slightly. So so there's no way to do the entire message, but you could have a structure that validates the event time. But I don't think that's very interesting. I think you should just publish this just to get the SID file, because the procedure for getting a SID file requires a Yang module. So if you want SIDs assigned to these two items, that's the only way to go. And it isn't for validation, because you can't represent the message that is defined in 5277. You can't do pretty much like the RPC element, you couldn't do either.
No.
Because as soon as you get to the method name, Yang has no way to do that.
Yeah, so there are two things. When we are explaining vendors or implementers of Yang push, they are always asking why there is some sort of IETF notification without a Yang module, since Yang defines this as a namespace. And second thing, yeah, I agree. We are all only defining the event time header, and that's all. The rest, it's defined in the Yang push RFC, and we are not touching that.
And I just want exactly to say that.
Rob in the queue. So I think it'd be useful to have a Yang definition of generating events that we can use for any encoding. And I feel at the moment that it's all a bit hokey and piecemeal, that we've got 5277 that defines for XML, and we've got other documents that say, oh, if you're going to send it over this one, use this module name, and if it's this particular encoding, and if we can some way get a commonality for that, that would be really nice, because that's the thing that we're missing, that you can't augment stuff in here because there's no module. And you may think it's like a Yang next issue, I don't know, but I'm hoping it's not. But
well, any parser will get the entire message, not just event time. So it's not useful to validate a message that has more than just event time in it, and it's mandated to have more than just event time in it. The method, I mean, the element for the event is not optional. The RFC 257 XSD is very clear. It's a notification element, event time element, followed by something, one more element. And, you know, so you won't be able to have what you want, Rob, because you won't be able to use that against a real message. You can use it to define SIDs, but you won't be able to validate an actual notification.
So let me go to one by backups. Not this one, this one. So I think the missing gap is in Yang, where we define the notifications with the notification statement, but on my understanding of Yang and Yang push is that this notification somehow it adds this event time leaf, and this comes from RFC 85277. So that's why, in a way, I think in the structure defined in this draft, we are only defining this header, and the link with Yang is the notification statement. So that's why I see the link and how to validate the whole thing. I don't know.
You mean you would create some new procedure with like normative text that's not anything to do with Yang? Because as you're aware, the event cannot be modeled in this structure. So if you're using the structure to validate the notification message, it will fail because it will have extra stuff in it according to the struct. That's all.
Okay, maybe let's talk offline. Jean.
Yeah, so sorry, just to say, I think just even for the sake of having the seeds, as Andy was saying, and being able to have a common structure, common way of encoding between CBOR, XML, and JSON, I think this draft just for that is very, very useful.
Okay, thanks. Well, I only have 2 minutes now. Given the feedback, we have revised, did a major revision on this draft, and now we are proposing 3 things. Using normative text to explicit how messages are encoded in the different encodings, a bit mimicking how RESTConf is doing it. Defining the Yang, and then given that RESTConf uses their own namespace, we have decided to put RESTConf out of the scope to not break in a way RESTConf. And it's updating a few set of RFCs since to explain why in a way we are doing this.
What do you mean RESTConf is out of scope?
So on RESTConf is out of scope. It's saying that on RESTConf there is normative text saying that notification has IETF RESTConf as a namespace. And what we are saying in the draft is that when the notifications are sent through RESTConf, we are not changing that namespace. That's the only thing.
Thomas here, just to add what Rob said before about it's a bit honky. So in IETF RESTConf, we have this normative text, where in HTTPS notif, we have a different way of doing it. And here we're just trying to make sure that we can find a common way of doing things. Thanks.
Could we maybe try and hold an interim on this topic? Possibly. I think it's quite a knotty one. I think there's a lot of details, and I think that it needs a lot more discussion.
That sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, so this was one change. The Yang module also to be backwards compatible with 5277 using the same namespace. And right now we are using normative text saying that a notification is composed by a notification container, IETF notification, and so on. Question to the working group is this the way to fix the issue? Is the normative text solving this gap, or should we change the approach, or how should we
I
approach this?
I think we just decided that we're going to have an interim, a virtual interim.
Okay.
So let's defer the questions until then. Okay. Thank you.
Thomas.
Thanks. So that's about support of hostname and sequencing in Yang notification. So we just had the introduction about the notification element. So here, currently what's missing is when the notification message is being forwarded from the Yang push receiver downstream to another data processing element without augmenting based on the transport IP address, the host name, we cannot identify anymore from where the message is coming from. So therefore, we think it's essential that the host name should be part of the notification message. And we believe it's best in the notification header itself, since it's unrelated to the subscription. So here in yellow, these are the two elements which we are adding in the notification message. And we are also adding in the so-called system capabilities and also in the notification capabilities of RFC 9196. These elements so that it is discoverable, so that the Yang push receiver knows that the Yang push publisher has this capability and will be adding this information to the notification header. That's in a nutshell what changed in the last revision of the document. Looking forward to get feedback from the working group.
Rashad, so when I last looked at that draft, I think the sequence number was used to figure out if there were messages dropped.
That's correct, yes.
But depending on the transport you use, you could get, I think we're trying to do something similar in BFD. If you get out of order, you might make the wrong conclusion, right?
Right. So here we differentiate between transport and messaging.
Okay.
So since that message can be forwarded across the Yang push receiver, we want to be able or want to be capable of identifying message loss end to end.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood your answer, but it's fine. I'll follow up.
Okay.
Mahesh, I don't know, sorry, I preempted Per. Why don't you go ahead?
So I just wanted to ask, do you foresee any more metadata that you want to add to the notification, asking as a contributor?
No, I don't. And that's a discussion currently we have with the RFC 3535 BIS. I believe at IETF for network telemetry protocol, we should agree on some basic elements, like all the protocols should use. And I believe one of it is a timestamp, is a host name and a sequence number.
Yeah, thank you.
Mahesh, I think what Rashad was referring to is in BFT, you get BFT packets with a particular sequence number. And if you were to receive them out of order, I don't want to bore everyone with BFT details, but it would be considered that you have dropped packets and BFT session would consider that the session has actually gone down. In your case, what Rashad is referring to is the fact that if you get updates out of sequence, you might actually decrement the count. Say you're getting updates on input packet count. If you get a packet that is out of sequence, you might land up decrementing the count instead of the fact that it has been incrementing. Right. So I think, Rashad, sorry, is that what you're referring to?
That was not exactly it, but that's a valid question.
Okay.
Right. And my point was just, these are discussions on two different OSI layers. So one is the transport and one is the messaging layer, or in this case, the application layer. And we just want to keep those two things different.
Andy Bierman, so I have a couple of questions. The sequence number is only relevant for UDP because the other transports preserve order. So, and the UDP transport already has a message ID in it. So I don't see why the sequence number helps, why it needs to be in the notification, because it's already in the UDP header. And then also the host name, I just can't imagine all our customers being happy with adding a really long string to every single notification we send. You know, I don't think that's something that's needed everywhere. If it's only needed for Yang push, then why isn't it only for Yang push? So I think it's fine to have metadata, and I don't agree that every single application on the planet will need the exact same set of metadata. So that's probably something that needs to be considered.
So maybe Andy, here a question: how else would you identify from which node this message has been published from?
Well, I mean, the UDP header has the observer ID and the message ID and a sequence ID.
Right, but that's on a different OSI layer. When you forward that message, you need to augment currently that message. This is what
That's an
every
implementation detail.
Kent, as a contributor, you said that the server would publish its capabilities so that the receiver knew that it would receive these extra headers.
Correct.
But is it not that the subscriber, says that I wish to receive these extra headers? Like in the subscription request, is it saying I wish to receive these extra headers, or is it just automatic?
It is automatic.
That's a change in behavior for existing systems, right?
That's correct.
So why wouldn't it? We don't do that normally. We always have it that the client says that it wishes to have a change in behavior.
Right. I was referring before on RFC 3535 bis and some basic requirements which each network telemetry protocol should have. And one of the requirement, I believe, is from where the message is being pushed from.
I don't deny or dispute the require or the desire, but in order to support backwards compatibility with existing systems, I'm not sure if it's okay for the server to just push new data automatically.
Right, I understand that. We thought we addressed that with that it's now discoverable.
Okay.
So just quick on that one. Maybe you can make it configurable or something on the device to determine that behavior. I actually want to comment on the sequence numbers. And if I understand this correctly, the UDP sequence number is being used for the hop between the device and the initial collector you're collecting to, whereas the sequence number that you're putting in further down is for like the end-to-end flow. So you've got the sequence ID to track it all the way through to the final destination. And it's the same information as to with like the host name thing.
Exactly.
The difference is it's not to that first hop. It's can you get it all the way through the Kafka bus through into the time series database and have the integrity all the way through.
Correct.
Benoit Claes, on top of what you said on the host name, which is fully right, Rob, the thing with UDP is that UDP, whenever you are on the collector on beyond, what you see, Andy, is like the unique ID of the box that you manage is the IP address that you see. And whenever you take any protocol with UDP, management protocol with UDP, this is the IP address of the outgoing interface of the router. So if you take this interface or that one, if you see NetFlow, if you see syslog, you're going to see two different management IP addresses, right? So this is an issue at the top there. As Rob was mentioning, one hop further after the collection system. So I don't believe this is encryption detail. It's actually a basic problem we have, which is what is the management ID of routers in the network? And I believe that we should have all the management protocol having the same ID, at least the one that are UDP-based, the UDP-based ones.
So the queue is locked. I think we need to, with respect to the next presenters, we need to progress. So you have to take these comments on this. I'm sorry, Olga. The queue is locked.
You have 2 more slides. Are we done?
Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
So the next document is about adding observation timestamping into Young notifications. Just to remind, currently we have a timestamp which is describing when the notification message is being sent from the Young publisher to the Young push receiver. What we are missing is when actually the metrics were being observed in the Young push subscription. And we are adding 2 informations in the Young push header. One is the so-called observation time, so when the information was being obtained from the Young data store. And in point in time, we are describing basically, depending on whether we are doing periodical or on-chain subscriptions, at which point this has been observed. So for instance, at the accounting start, so at the polling interval in the periodical subscription, or for instance, in on-change, when actually the change, for instance, from an interface from up to down happened. And yeah, we also added in this document the capability to actually discover that additional information, like I explained in the previous document, relates to RFC 9196. And for both documents, which I have shown, so the sequencing and also the observation time, we already have the first implementation. Please refer to the hackathon slides if you want to see more on the test cases we have and also the results we have drawn. And we are looking forward for the next IETF 121.
Great, thank you. Okay. And we are running a little bit, 10 minutes behind, so our 10-minute buffer has been consumed. Per, I believe you're up. Presenter.
Hello. On the behalf of the authors of NETCONF Over Quick, I will present this draft to you. So why do we need NETCONF Over Quick? Well, almost all current secure transport protocols used by NETCONF, they are TCP based. So they have SSH, TLS, SOAP, BIP, etc. TCP has some shortcomings that we all know of: head of line blocking, three-way handshake, and not supporting connection migration, and so on and so on. So why do we need Quick? So it's, as you know, it's a transport protocol, connection-oriented, secure, UDP-based. It has support for streams, stream multiplexing, low latency, and authentic encryption header and payload. So during the hackathon, I talked to one of the co-authors, Mark Blanchett, and he said that Quick was conceived to shave off a few, say, milliseconds or seconds on planet-wide operations. But for deep space, you can actually shave off, say, 45 minutes in round trip. So that is one of the main motivations. So what's in the draft? Connection management. You have the version identification for Quick, and you negotiate that, establish connection, and then it's defined how to close the connection and terminate it. So this is a familiar ASCII art. We can see here basically what this tries to show or convey is that we have mainly 2 different ways of operation. So RPC based, where you call out something and get a response that is bidirectional, and the other one is notification, so unidirectional. So mapping this to Quick then would mean that the bidirectional stream is the type 0, and the unidirectional stream notifications is mapped as Quick stream type 3. can authenticate by TLS client certificates, and the quick transport, quick TLS also defines the server identity and the client identity with TLS. Doesn't it? Okay. So there's IANA considerations in the draft, registering this protocol, the NOQ, NetConf over quick string, with these 3 bytes, and also to be done is to register a UDP port for NetConf over quick. This was done in, so recap from IETF 114. I actually didn't attend that, but the sentiment is that this work is valuable, and that was also the sentiment from last IETF, where Mark Blanchett came and asked at the mic that was needed. So updates in the 06 version, general document overhaul, improved citation to quick RFCs, improving description of the endpoint authentication, and description about connection management. Next step, further comments from the working group and the author's request adoption. I believe that's the last slide. Thank you.
While I'm bringing up the next slides, can anyone speak to the interest level? I would do a show of hands, but that disrupt me from bringing up the slides. But are folks interested in this? Should we go ahead and try to move it to adoption right away? I see 1 hand, 2 hand, 3. Okay, yeah. Good. Thank you. Oh, and someone's in the queue.
For the record, beep and soap have been marked historic. They're not current.
I believe there was there a comment in the queue?
Disappeared.
Okay. So I yield the rest of the time now, 5 minutes.
No. I have to cancel that timer to give you a new timer.
Yes, but bringing to the next presentation, Yang groupings for quick clients and quick servers, basically quick client server draft. It's a placeholder draft to define configuration for quick client, for the quick protocol. It's reusing TLS client server and UDP client server. At this moment, there's nothing more yet. I've done some experiments adding, we'll come to those later. So the solution overview, as I said, uses TLS and UDP groupings, and quick requires TLS 1.3. So there's an if feature requiring this in the model. These are the models: IETF quick client, IETF quick server. This is basically it so far. These are the groupings for the quick client. These are the groupings for the quick server. So if we draw up another draft, HTTP client server, it has this quick case in the transport choice, where it defines basically this, but not the if feature for TLS 1.3. So this quick client server could instead replace this with quick server parameters in the HTTP client server draft. This would also tie into then the NetConf client server draft, where probably the NetConf client server, the NetConf over quick draft, as was mentioned in the previous presentation, would augment the NetConf client server draft to add the quick server grouping there as a possible transport for NetConf. That is what I've tried. It's not in the draft yet, or any draft. I don't really know where it should go yet, but I'll discuss with the authors, probably in NetConf over quick. Yeah, so that is then a good way to go, I believe, because then NetConf client server doesn't need to stop, because nothing is hindering that draft to progress. But if we would stop it and add this quick choice, then that would be stopping that, and it's unnecessary in my view. So open questions. There has been some discussion on list with Med. What other parameters are valuable to add? What is the correct level of configuration option exposure here? And next steps to work on the questions raised, more feedback from the working group. Is it valuable to update other documents, as we saw HTTP client server, for instance, and adopt the document? Thank you. Kent?
Yeah, Kent as a contributor, it's great to hear that we don't need to hold up the NetConf client server draft in order for it to be augmented later on to introduce this case statement for Quick. But what about the HTTP client server draft? Would there be any need to hold it up in order to support this?
Yeah, I guess.
Say again?
Yeah, I guess if you would like to bring in quick client server instead of the thing that is in the protocol stacking now, we would need to hold up on that draft. To properly support it.
I'm not sure if there's appetite for that, but Mahesh is going to come to the queue. Rob?
Sorry to jump the queue from Mahesh. Yeah, it's not just the HTTP. Then you're back to impeding the NetConf client server and the RESTconf client server, right? So
and HTTPS notice.
And of course, HTTPS notice. So the question really is,
what harm would it do
if
we go ahead and push the HTTP client server without waiting?
Is it possible to refine the Yang model afterwards? You can refine the quick transport cases.
Sorry, do you say it is possible?
I'm asking. I think so, but I mean, I have to go to the computer and ask the computer what they think the tools. But I think so.
Yeah, I think my personal opinion, I think we should go ahead with the drafts we have, and then come back and look at what needs to change. I really don't want to hold those drafts up anymore.
I guess if it's really wanted to support quick client server draft, when that is finished, one could update those documents.
It'd be a biz.
Yeah, exactly.
So just a couple of quick comments. I think that we had discussion about the encoding for making an HTTP connection. If that's using a URL, then obviously I think that might mean you don't need to do this because you wouldn't know you're connecting to if it's HTTP 2 or 3.
That is for the client, as I've understood.
That's the client. So I think some of the drafts might have been.
Yeah. So if you have a NetConf server,
yeah,
you would like to configure that where
to support
the quick parameters, right?
And then, given we have still a little bit of time, I was going to make a quick comment on the previous presentation, which is to say that in terms of having a quick setup, the connection negotiation, I think it depends on how much security you want in that first pack of that first data. So to get the really fast reconnect, I think you lose some security properties, and what data you can put into that first pack is limited. But you need to look into the details.
The zero round trip and the one.
Yes,
yeah. And I think that is in the NetConf over quick that it mandates to not use zero RTT. If I recall correctly.
That seems sensible.
But that is for the NetConf over quick. So quick client server doesn't.
Correct. That's pretty.
Okay, we've drained the queue. Thank you, Per. Last presentation and then open mic. If there's an open mic conversation people would like to have, start thinking about that. Hi, Xiaolin. I've just passed slide control to you.
You're muted.
We cannot hear you. No, not yet. Okay, so let's start the open mic right now. When she comes back, we'll bring her in. I have one topic I'd like to start with, which is the feature compatibility between RESTConf and NetConf. It is my strong belief that we as a working group should ensure that the two protocols are the same from a feature perspective. Feature, like anything we add to NetConf, we should always be adding to RESTConf and vice versa.
Shay, please go ahead.
All right, just a quick comment, because RESTConf supports RPCs and actions, then anything you model in Yang is automatically supported by RESTConf.
Still can't hear you, Zelen. I saw some nods in the room when I was saying that, so others believe that the compatibility between the two protocols is something the working group should try to do. I think looking to our AD, Mahesh, perhaps we should update the charter to say this. Oh, yes, we can hear you now, but hold on a second. No, go ahead, Mahesh.
Mahesh, so in thinking about putting it in the charter, the real question would be, in concrete terms, are we evaluating every submission to say we want compatibility between RESTConf and NetConf? I'm trying to understand the implication of putting something like that in the charter, instead of it being an implicit assumption.
Maybe it doesn't have to be in the charter, perhaps the wrong location, but I'd like it to be posted somewhere official so that we can point to it. Because many times drafts come through and there's, everyone wants to do it for NetConf because their focus is on device, support. But, and then it's always the conversation we have to have, like, oh, can you add it to RESTConf also? And I want to head that off the pass and say, it is our working group's intention that we always try to make the two protocols the same.
I suggest that maybe we can add a milestone.
Sorry, add a milestone?
Add a milestone to have feature parity. It's very tongue-in-cheek comment. But then it wouldn't go into the charter and it would still be official, and it's something we're aiming for, is my thinking.
Yeah, adding it to the milestone is kind of left-handed way of putting something into the charter. Maybe we can chat a little bit about how to make that happen.
But I think the sentiment is in the room that we should do this. The mechanisms or the mechanics of how we do it is the question.
Right. I thought that was, and maybe it was just me that had that impression that, yes, when we try to propose something in this working group, the idea is that it's not just for NetConf, it's for RESTConf also. I'm not a strong opponent to it, but that's the implicit assumption in the working group. I don't know if we need to update the charter for it, but
it may be implicit, but it's not obvious. So a number of the drafts that we have currently, working group documents, the only reason that they have anything about RESTConf in them is because there was a conversation about, can you please add it, support for RESTConf to it as well. Okay. So I wish it to be more explicit.
Okay.
Xiaolin, can you come back, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Okay. So on behalf of all the others, I will present this draft. And during this period, we have submitted 3 new versions, and changes are mainly in the section 3 use case Kafka Yang integration, and we have added explanation that we will limit the scope of this use case into configure subscriptions because of the using the UDP notif as UDP as transport method. And we also have explained how the feature proposed in this draft will improve fine dependency solution compared to the existing get all schema solutions. And in the 0.2 version we submitted this week, we have added in appendix the IETF Yang library impact analysis as an evaluation for doing a draft RFC, doing an RFC 8525B draft. And as for a further explanation for the context of UDP notif and configure subscriptions, since we are working on the YAM Kafka's integration architectures, which main goal is to organize YAM data into a time series database. Due to the need of real-time ingestions, we are expecting it to handle massive amount of data using the UDP with higher frequency and less performance impact while preserving necessary metadata, so that we also enable receiver that the receiver can understand the YAM semantic. And because of the usage of UDP, we do not expect that there will be one communication channel that will do both the job of making the subscriptions and that the receiver will receive in this channel the YAM push notification message, and therefore it has to only the configure subscription will be applied here as opposed to the dynamic subscriptions. And then the issue is how we're going to obtain in real time the knowledge of a specific YAM models dependency list when we learn about a new subscribed YAM subscribed modules. And in the architecture, in step 3, it is relying on the subscription started message to learn which module is subscribed, and then it will use get schema to get the subscribe module and the dependency list of it. And from the perspective of the collector, with what currently YAM supported, it is only through getting all the modules from the device that it can make sure the receiver has the complete dependencies of one module due to the existence of reverse dependency, augmentations, and deviations. But it is getting all the modules is very time consuming because real router usually implements hundreds of modules, and the process could take several minutes to be done, and it is not an option for closed loop automation if it's going to be done each time there is a subscribe module learned. And following what the questions we proposed in the last IETF, we decide to augment the deprecated container module states, but only put it into appendix. And we will not model the module sets name as a key in our proposed module, because the fact that allowing a module to augment another module in another set might cause bigger problem. And the implementation status for hackathons. Throughout the past 3 hackathons, we've been working on delivering open source code for this feature augmented byte. And in the IETF 117, we have used the get all schemas in the YAM push message parcel library libyam push as the method to find dependencies. And we have implemented in the libyam and sys reports in IETF 119 the augmented spy feature in it. And during this hackathon, we have made a Docker net-to-peer to Docker image to work about this feature. And according to the screenshot, we can see that this net-to-peer version can support exporting the augmented by list. And for the libyam push, we feed it with the subscription started message, and then it will send gets YAMLib to the device, and we verify that it provides the correct reverse dependency list. And here, as an explanation to our find dependency solution based on augmented by, and also answer to feedbacks we received, the problem of whether the gets or schema maintain non-updated module, whether it can be solved by subscribing to YAMLib update or not. So it is true, but it does not apply to the architecture where we have applied the UDP notif, because the get all schema is the get schema action is sent each time we learn that there is a subscribe module, and then after it's done, the connection the connection is cut, and we have no idea we have no idea that during this time whether the module has updated, the device has updated modules or not, and we will not receive any Yang leak updates since the connection is lost. And for the current status of document, we have resolved all known issues, and we have provided open source implementations during the hackathons, and we would like to call for adoptions. But since during the last IETF presentation, we have heard idea about doing an RFC 8525B draft instead. So we would like to follow up on that idea. We have put it as an open issue to whether do an independent submission or do RFC to do a base draft. And according to the IETF Young Library impact analysis, there are currently 3 active documents that's augmenting this IETF Young Library. They are the IETF Young Library Semver and the IETF Young Status Conformance and the full embedded library. And regarding the next step, we as author, we favor to standardize the draft first because to do a base draft, it might take more time. And here, this is the information for links and draft author. And in the appendix, we have put the rest of the modules in the impact analysis. Thank you.
Okay, Andy, you're in the queue.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here, but I support the use case that you want to only receive part of the Yang library because, or part of the modules. So that's my first comment, is it's not an issue with Yang library, it's an issue with get schema that you're having, correct? You're getting the entire Yang library in order to read the whole thing, and then you only want to retrieve a subset of modules from the server.
Yes.
Instead of all the modules. And should point out, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, that because the module name revision date isn't actually unique, then a Yang file is useless. So you have to use get schema to get it from the server. And so one should look at optimizing that retrieval. I agree that doing 150 get schema requests could take you some minutes. So I would think the solution would focus on optimizing what you receive for this partial, how you are doing get schema. There is no get all schema. There's only the one get schema that returns one at a time, but doesn't mean there couldn't be a new one that returned all the schemas you want in one go. So you had one round trip instead of 150.
Thomas Graf speaking. Shoya, thanks a lot. I mean, it's always great to see open source implementations of document. I think this is really important. And you've been raising the questions about the 2 options we have. And I would like to comment on that. I would rather support an incremental approach. I think we need to move forward quickly. And to follow up what Andy says, yes, I think we need optimizations. And I think what we're describing here is that we do not have to obtain all the Yang models, only the relevant part. Thanks.
Benoit, can you put back the slides about the 2 options, please? So, Andy, you're right. The issue is that if you take the OSXR right now, there are like 1,500 Yang modules, and we just a couple of them. So whether we do this with an improved RPC or with the Yang, this Yang module, in the end, it's the same thing. Now, a router can find the deviations and advertise this directly. So if the router knows this, right, it should be directly in this Yang module and IETF library extension. So one way or the other, we need this optimization, right? So the option 1 there, we favor it. Actually, it would have been cleaner to do 85-25 bis, but we know it's going to take some time. So maybe that's going to be for future, call it whatever you want, Yang Next, whatever. And we have implementation and it's required.
Mahesh, yes, I also support this work as, of course, as a contributor. And to Andy, your point that one of the optimizations you said is, I guess what I understood is, you make one request and you get all the schemas in one go, but it still doesn't optimize the actual getting of 150 schemas, right? So the idea I thought here, yeah.
RPC that just gets you what I call a Yang library lit or something, just like the chunk of the Yang library that you care about. So no, you don't, not one request do you receive all 150.
Like an
so
optimization.
the use cases, I just got a subscription and it's going to be for IETF interfaces. Well, actually, it's a bad one because there's so much stuff that augments IETF interfaces. But there are lots of modules that it will be a significant reduction. So we see in implementations hundreds of Yang modules, and maybe the push will only need 6.
Okay, we're running over, so please keep your comments short.
Only 1 second.
Yeah, please.
So what Andy commented is, for that, we need to know the dependencies, and this is what the draft is about.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. We are going to have an interim coming up shortly to discuss that one item. There's a few drafts. Yeah, that's what I'm getting to. So we have a few documents that are going to go to a working group last call, and there's a few documents that are going to do we're going to have adoption calls for. You want to do a quick show?
So we're doing a poll for the interest in this last presented draft. Should we adopt augment Yang lib?
Can you add one to support, because I already shut down my laptop?
I couldn't catch that. Add one.
No, they can do it for you, but count it up. He said he shut down his laptop.
Oh, okay. Okay. +1 for Andy. Well, it is so far unanimous, yes. So thank you. We will move to adoption. And thank you, everyone, for joining. This is the end of the NETCONF session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you 121.